to sleeping nature voice. Tonight, as the world around you begins to grow quiet, you are invited to leave behind the busyness of the day and step into a gentler place. A place where soft lanterns glow through silver fog, where steam trains travel slowly through the countryside, where rain whispers against old windows, and where the night unfolds one peaceful moment at a time. So settle comfortably, lounge your shoulders to soften, let your breathing become slow and easy. And as you listen, imagine yourself traveling back to Victorian England, to a quiet autumn evening, and to the story of the last train home on a foggy evening. The fog arrived shortly before sunset. At first it appeared as thin ribbons drifting across distant meadows, but as evening approached, those ribbons slowly joined together. They flowed over fields and stone walls. They slipped between rows of oak trees. They drifted across winding country roads, and before long the entire countryside seemed wrapped in a soft silver blanket. The village of Rosewood Crossing rested peacefully beneath that blanket of mist. Warm lights glowed from cottage windows, curtains were drawn, doors were closed against the cool evening air. Inside each home, fires crackled softly in fireplaces. Tea kettles hummed gently upon iron stoves. The comforting sense of fresh bread and wood smoke drifted into the night. Everything felt calm. Everything felt slow. Everything felt wonderfully still. At the edge of the village stood Rosewood Crossing Station. It was not a large station. There were no grand halls or crowded platforms. Only a single platform, a small ticket office, a waiting room with polished wooden benches, and a station clock that had faithfully marked the passing hours for more than 30 years. The station seemed almost magical in the fog. Lanterns hung from black iron posts. Their golden light spread softly through the mist. Each lamp created its own glowing circle. Beyond those circles, the world faded gently into shadow. The station clock ticked steadily. Tock, 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 tock. Its familiar rhythm blended perfectly with the peaceful evening. Arthur Pembroke listened to that rhythm every night. He was the station master, a kind man in his late 50s with silver hair and gentle eyes. For nearly 20 years, he had worked at Rosewood Crossing Station. He knew every train schedule by heart. He knew every regular passenger. And he knew exactly how the station sounded on evenings like this one. There was a special quietness to foggy nights. The sounds seemed softer, more distant, almost dreamlike. Arthur stepped onto the platform and adjusted the collar of his wool coat. The air felt cool and fresh. He breathed deeply. The scent of damp leaves lingered in the mist. Somewhere nearby, rain had recently fallen. The stone platform still glistened beneath the lantern light. Tiny reflections shimmered across the wet surface. Arthur smiled. He had always loved evenings like these. They reminded him that not every moment in life needed to be rushed. Some moments were meant to unfold slowly, like pages in a favorite book, like clouds drifting across the moon, like the steady journey of a train through the countryside. The station clock showed 8:30. The last train would not arrive for several hours. Yet Arthur enjoyed preparing early. It had become a ritual, a comforting routine repeated thousands of times throughout the years. First, he inspected each lantern. One by one, he walked along the platform. Their warm flames flickered gently behind glass panels. Satisfied, he continued. Next came the benches. He checked that each one was clean and dry. Not that many passengers would be waiting tonight. Most travelers preferred earlier trains. The last train home usually carried only a handful of passengers, tired workers, students returning from the city, occasional visitors heading home after a long day. Arthur liked the last train best. Its passengers always seemed quieter, calmer. As though the night itself encouraged gentleness, the station cat appeared as Arthur reached the far end of the platform. Her name was Olive. She emerged from beneath a bench and stretched lazily. Her striped fur shimmered beneath the lantern light. Arthur chuckled softly. "Good evening, Olive." The cat blinked slowly, then she settled beside a warm lamp and curled into a comfortable ball. Within moments, she appeared half asleep. Arthur secretly envied her talent. Cats always seem to know how to relax, how to trust the quietness of an evening, how to surrender completely to comfort. He watched Olive for a moment, then he continued his rounds. As the evening deepened, a gentle rain began to fall. At first it was little more than a whisper. Tiny droplets drifting through the fog. They landed softly upon rooftops, upon leaves, upon cobblestones. The sound was barely noticeable. Yet somehow it made the night feel even more peaceful. Arthur stood beneath the station canopy and listened. Rain on wood, rain on stone, rain upon distant trees. The sounds blended together like a gentle lullaby. Across the tracks, fields stretched into darkness. Though hidden by fog, Arthur knew every inch of that landscape. Rolling meadows, small farms, ancient hedgerows, narrow streams winding through valleys. Beyond them stood low hills that watched over the countryside. During daylight, the view was beautiful. Tonight it existed only in memory. The fog had hidden everything, yet somehow that made the world feel larger, more mysterious, more comforting, like a story waiting patiently to be told. 9 o'clock arrived. Then 9:30, the village grew quieter still. Most homes extinguished their lamps one by one. The roads emptied. The church bell rang softly in the distance. 9 slow chimes. Then silence returned. Arthur entered the waiting room. Inside, a small coal fire glowed within an iron stove. The warmth felt welcoming after the cool air outside. He placed fresh coal into the stove and listened as the fire crackled happily. The room smelled of polished wood and old books. A shelf near the window held several novels left behind by travelers. Their worn covers hinted at countless journeys, countless stories. Arthur selected one and sat in his favorite chair. The chair rested beside the stove. Its cushions were soft from years of use. He opened the book and began reading. Outside, rain continued to fall. The station clock continued its steady ticking, and the fog continued drifting across the countryside. Everything moved slowly. Everything felt peaceful. For nearly an hour, Arthur read quietly. Occasionally he glanced through the window. Nothing disturbed the calm night. No sudden noises. No hurried footsteps. Only the gentle rhythm of rain and clockwork. Eventually he closed the book. The story could wait until tomorrow. Tonight felt too beautiful to spend entirely indoors. He returned to the platform. The rain had become slightly heavier. Still gentle, still soothing. The lanterns glowed brighter against the darkness. Their reflections danced across the wet stones. Arthur looked down the tracks. Somewhere beyond the fog, far beyond the hills, the last train home was preparing for its journey. He imagined passengers finding their seats, conductors checking tickets, steam rising into the cool night air, the locomotive waiting patiently. Soon it would begin its journey toward Rosewood Crossing. Soon its whistle would echo across the countryside. Soon its warm lights would appear through the fog. But for now, the station remained quiet. The night remained gentle. And Arthur stood beneath the lantern glow, listening to the rain and watching the mist drift slowly across the sleeping world. The rain continued its gentle song. Soft droplets tapped against the station roof. The lanterns glowed warmly, and the fog drifted lazily across the empty countryside. Arthur stood quietly beside the platform clock. Its hands now approached 11 o'clock. The last train home would arrive soon, not immediately, but soon enough that he could almost sense its approach. There was something special about trains at night. During the day they felt practical, buzzy, purposeful. But at night they became something else entirely. Something comforting. Something almost magical. Their lights appeared through darkness like wandering stars. Their whistles echoed across sleeping fields. Their journeys felt slower, softer, as though the entire world had agreed to lower its voice. Arthur glanced once more down the tracks. Nothing yet, only fog, only darkness, only silence. Then, very faintly, he heard it. A distant whistle, long, low, gentle. The sound drifted across the countryside. It floated through the fog. It rolled softly over hills and fields. Arthur smiled. The last train home had begun its final approach. Several minutes passed. The whistle sounded again, this time slightly closer. Olive the station cat lifted her head. Her ears twitched. Then she stretched slowly and climbed onto a nearby bench. She seemed curious, as though she too enjoyed greeting the night's final train. Arthur adjusted his pocket watch. Right on schedule. Just as always, the old station clock agreed. Its steady ticking continued. Tick-tock, tick, and then another sound joined it, a distant rhythmic pulse, soft at first, barely noticeable, yet unmistakable. The sound of wheels upon rails. The sound grew slowly. Lick-it-clack, 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 a wonderfully soothing rhythm, steady, reliable, comforting. Arthur had heard it thousands of times, yet it never lost its charm. The rhythm reminded him of a heartbeat. Calm mode, unhurried, the heartbeat of the railway itself. Far beyond the fog, a warm light appeared, tiny at first, almost like a lantern carried through the darkness. Then it grew larger, brighter, closer. The locomotive's headlamp shone through the mist. Golden beams illuminated swirling clouds of steam. The train seemed to emerge from a dream. Its dark shape gradually became visible. The polished engine, the elegant passenger carriages, the glowing windows. Each carriage carried pools of warm, yellow light. Inside passengers sat quietly. Many already looked sleepy. Some gazed out windows. Others rested with books upon their laps. A few had already drifted into light sleep. The train slowed gracefully. Steam hissed softly. Brakes whispered against metal wheels. And finally, the last train home came to a gentle stop beside the platform. Arthur tipped his hat toward the conductor. The conductor returned the greeting. Both men had known each other for years. No words were necessary. The simple nod felt familiar, comfortable, like an old friendship. The doors opened. Only a handful of passengers stepped onto the platform. A gentleman carrying a leather satchel, an elderly woman wrapped in a wool shawl, a young teacher returning from the city. They moved quietly through the fog. Soon they disappeared toward the village. Their footsteps faded. Silence returned. One carriage remained warmly lit. Arthur glanced inside. The compartment looked wonderfully cozy. Polished wooden walls reflected soft lantern light. Velvet seats lined each side. Brass fittings gleamed gently. Everything appeared warm and welcoming. The conductor approached. "Quiet evening tonight," he said softly. Arthur nodded. "The quietest are often the best." The conductor smiled. "I believe you're right." For a moment, both men listened to the rain. The train released another gentle sigh of steam. Somehow the sound felt relaxing, almost sleepy, as though even the locomotive were preparing for rest. Soon departure time arrived. Passengers settled into their seats. Doors closed softly. The conductor checked his watch, then raised a small lantern. The signal glowed briefly through the fog. The engineer responded with a low whistle. Not loud, not startling, just enough to announce the journey's continuation. Steam drifted upward. Wheels began turning, slowly, smoothly. The train eased forward. Click-clack, click-clack, click-clack. The rhythm returned, gentle and steady. Arthur watched as carriage after carriage slipped into the fog. Golden windows drifted through the darkness, then disappeared completely. Only the distant sound of wheels remained. Click-clack, click-clack, click-click-clack, growing softer, fainter, until finally, silence returned once more. But our story follows the train. So imagine now that you are seated comfortably inside one of those warm Victorian carriages. Perhaps you have chosen a seat beside the window. A soft blanket rests across your lap. The compartment feels wonderfully warm. Outside, rain traces delicate patterns across the glass. Beyond the window lies only fog and darkness. Yet somehow the darkness feels comforting, protective, peaceful. The train rocks gently as it travels, back and forth, a slow, soothing motion, almost like being rocked in a cradle. The wheels continue their endless rhythm, click-it-clack, click-it-clack, click-it-clack. Each sound feels softer than the last. Each mile carries you deeper into the sleeping countryside. A small reading lamp glows above your seat. Its golden light illuminates polished wood panels. Nearby, a fellow traveler has fallen asleep. A book rests upon his lap. His breathing remains slow and steady. Across the compartment, an elderly woman gazes peacefully through the rain-covered window. She appears perfectly content, perfectly relaxed. No one speaks. No one rushes. There is no need. The night itself seems to encourage quietness. Outside, fields drift past unseen. Villages sleep beneath blankets of mist. Farmhouses glow faintly in the distance. Occasionally, a lantern appears beside a lonely road, then vanishes behind the fog. Everything moves gently. Everything feels calm. As midnight approaches, the train enters deeper countryside. The rain softens. The fog thickens. The locomotive continues faithfully onward. Its steady engine creates a low, comforting hum. The sound blends perfectly with the rhythm of wheels. Together they create something almost hypnotic, a peaceful soundtrack for the sleeping world. You rest comfortably against your seat. Your eyes feel heavier now. The warmth of the carriage surrounds you. The rain whispers softly against glass. The wheels continue their gentle song. Mick-it-clack, mick-it-clack, mick-it-clack. And somewhere ahead, far beyond the fog, a warm home awaits. A glowing fireplace, a comfortable chair, a peaceful night's rest. But there is no hurry to arrive. The journey itself is part of the comfort, part of the dream. And so the train continues through the misty Victorian countryside, carrying its sleepy passengers gently through the night. The train continued its peaceful journey through the sleeping countryside. Outside the window, the fog drifted softly across open fields. Rain still fell, though now it was little more than a gentle whisper, the sort of rain that seemed to belong to dreams. The sort of rain that made warm rooms feel even warmer. Inside the carriage, everything remained wonderfully quiet. The reading lamps glowed softly. The polished wooden walls reflected pools of golden light. The gentle sway of the train continued. Back and forth, steady, comforting to sleepy. Many passengers had already drifted into slumber. Heads rested against cushions. Books lay forgotten upon laps. Travel bags sat quietly beside polished shoes. The entire carriage seemed wrapped in a blanket of peace. Even the train itself appeared relaxed. Its engine hummed softly ahead. Its wheels continued their familiar rhythm. Click-clack, 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 like a lullaby carried upon steel rails, like a heartbeat moving gently through the night. Far ahead, beyond fields and hedgerows, A small village slept beneath the fog. Its cottages rested quietly beneath dark rooftops. Only a handful of windows still glowed. A baker preparing tomorrow's bread. A lighthouse keeper reading beside a lamp. A grandmother finishing her evening tea. The train passed silently beyond the village. For a brief moment, its golden windows reflected in rain-covered puddles. Then it disappeared once more into the mist. The countryside welcomed it. Old oak trees stood silently beside the tracks. Stone bridges crossed quiet streams. Ancient hills watched from the darkness. Everything seemed timeless. Everything seemed calm, as though the entire landscape had settled comfortably into sleep. Imagine now that you are still seated beside the window. The warmth of the carriage surrounds you. Your blanket feels soft, your seat feels comfortable. The gentle rocking motion continues. Outside, rain slides slowly down the glass. Tiny droplets merge together, then drift downward. Each movement slow, each movement peaceful. You watch them for a while, without effort, without thought, simply watching, simply resting, simply being. The train carries you onward. There is nowhere you need to hurry. No task waiting for you. No responsibility demanding attention. Only this journey. Only this moment. Only the soothing rhythm of wheels upon rails. Click-clack, click-clack, click-clack. After some time, the conductor quietly moved through the carriage. His footsteps were soft upon the carpet runner. In one hand he carried a small lantern. Its warm glow danced gently across brass fittings and wooden panels. He smiled kindly at sleeping passengers, careful not to wake anyone, careful not to disturb the peace that had settled throughout the train. At the end of the carriage, he paused beside a window. Outside, he could see the faint glow of distant station lamps. The next stop was approaching, a small countryside station, the final destination of the evening. The last stop before everyone returned home. The conductor glanced at his watch, then nodded with quiet satisfaction. Right on schedule, just as always. Far ahead, lanterns appeared through the fog. One, then two, then several more. Their golden circles glowed warmly against the silver mist. The train began slowing. Gradually, gently, the engine released a soft sigh of steam. The wheels turned more slowly. The familiar rhythm softened. Click, clack, clack, click, clack, until eventually, the train glided into the station. The platform appeared almost magical. Lanterns lined the edge. Their reflections shimmered across rain-darkened stones. Flower boxes rested beneath windows. A clock glowed softly above the station entrance. Everything looked peaceful. Everything looked welcoming. Everything looked like home. Passengers slowly gathered their belongings. No one rushed. No one hurried. There was time, plenty of time. The train had safely completed its journey. The night remained calm. The rain remained gentle. One by one, travelers stepped onto the platform. Their footsteps echoed softly. Steam drifted upward around them. Golden light reflected through the mist. The scene felt almost dreamlike, as though the world had become a painting. A quiet Victorian painting, filled with lanterns, rain, and warm memories. Imagine yourself stepping from the carriage. The cool night air greets you gently. The scent of rain and wet earth fills the air. Somewhere nearby, wood smoke drifts from cottage chimneys. The station feels peaceful, comfortable, safe. You pull your coat a little closer and begin walking toward home. The village road stretches ahead. Gas lamps glow softly along the path. Their light spills onto wet cobblestones. Tiny reflections shimmer beneath your feet. The fog moves lazily between cottages. Not thick, not frightening. Only soft and gentle, like a blanket wrapped around the sleeping village. As you walk, you pass quiet homes. Behind curtains, fireplaces still glow. A clock chimes softly somewhere in the distance. A cat sleeps comfortably upon a windowsill. A kettle cools beside a stove. Every home seems settled. Every home seems at rest. The village itself appears sleepy, as though it too is preparing for dreams. Your footsteps remain slow, unhurried. There is no need to rush. The evening has become one of those rare moments that asks for nothing. A moment simply to enjoy. A moment simply to experience. A moment simply to be. Soon your destination appears through the mist. A cozy Victorian cottage. Warm light glows from its windows. Smoke rises gently from its chimney. The sight immediately brings comfort. You open the garden gate. Its hinges creak softly. Rain glistens upon rose bushes beside the path. Tiny droplets sparkle beneath the lantern light. Everything looks beautiful in the quiet darkness. Everything feels welcoming. Everything feels peaceful. Inside, a fire burns softly within the hearth. Orange flames dance lazily. The room glows with warmth. A comfortable chair waits beside the fireplace. A blanket rests across its arm. A teacup sits upon a small wooden table. The entire room seems designed for rest. For comfort, for sleep, you settle into the chair. The warmth reaches you immediately. Outside, rain continues tapping softly against the windows. Inside, the fire crackles gently. The combination is wonderfully relaxing. Rain and fire, warmth and comfort, night and peace. The hours grow later. The village grows quieter. The rain becomes softer still. Even the wind seems sleepy now. The fire settles into glowing embers. The room grows dimmer, gentler, calmer. You close your eyes for a moment. Only a moment, just long enough to listen. Rain upon glass, fire upon wood, silence between sounds, the comforting memory of the train, its lanterns, its warm carriage, its gentle rhythm. Click-clack, me-click-clack, me-click-clack. Still echoing softly somewhere in memory. Still carrying you deeper toward rest. And now the countryside sleeps. The station sleeps. The village sleeps. The train rests quietly upon its tracks until morning. The lanterns continue glowing softly through the fog. The rain continues falling gently upon rooftops and gardens. And the peaceful Victorian night continues unfolding exactly as it should. Slowly, quietly, beautifully. As you rest comfortably and allow your thoughts to drift away, may the soft rhythm of the train remain with you. May the lantern light guide you toward peaceful dreams. And may the fog-covered countryside carry you gently into a deep and restful sleep. Good night, and thank you for listening to Sleeping Nature Voice. The cottage was quiet. Not the kind of quiet that feels empty. The kind of quiet that feels warm, comfortable, lived in. Outside, the rain continued its gentle journey across the countryside. Droplets gathered on ivy leaves. They slipped slowly down stone walls. They tapped softly against windows. The entire village seemed wrapped in a blanket of silver mist. Inside, the fire glowed peacefully. The bright flames of earlier hours had settled into deep orange embers. Occasionally, a small spark rose upward, then disappeared into the chimney. The room felt wonderfully still. The old grandfather clock in the corner marked the passing minutes. Dotch-kick, dotch-kick. Its familiar rhythm blended with the rain. Together, they created a gentle soundtrack for the sleeping night. Arthur sat comfortably beside the hearth. A wool blanket rested across his knees. His favorite armchair welcomed him like an old friend. For many years, this had been his nightly ritual. The last train would arrive. The station would close. The village would grow quiet. And eventually he would return home to this peaceful room. Some evenings he would read. Some evenings he would write letters. But tonight felt different. Tonight felt slower, softer. The fog outside had transformed the entire world. Everything seemed distant. Everything seemed calm. Arthur watched the glowing embers. Their orange light danced gently across the room. Upon bookshelves, upon framed photographs, upon polished wooden furniture, every object seemed touched by warmth, touched by memory. Beside the fireplace stood a small bookshelf. Many of its volumes had traveled through the years alongside Arthur. Adventure stories, travel journals, columns of poetry, histories of railways. And among them rested a worn leather journal. Arthur reached for it. The journal was old now, its corners softened by time. Its pages carried memories, gathered across decades. He opened it carefully. Inside were notes from countless evenings, observations of weather, descriptions of sunsets, memories of passengers he had met. Simple moments that might otherwise have been forgotten. Arthur smiled as he turned the pages. One entry described a snowy Christmas Eve train. Another spoke of spring flowers blooming beside the tracks. Another recalled a summer thunderstorm rolling across distant hills. Small moments, ordinary moments, yet somehow they felt important. Because life itself was often made from ordinary moments. A warm cup of tea, a friendly greeting, the sound of rain upon a roof, the glow of lanterns through fog, the steady rhythm of a train returning home. Outside, the rain softened further. Now it was little more than a whisper, a delicate brushing sound against glass. The village slept peacefully. No footsteps crossed the streets, no wagons rattled over cobblestones. Even the wind seemed content to rest. Arthur closed the journal. He leaned back in his chair. The fire continued glowing. The clock continued ticking. The rain continued falling. And somewhere beyond the mist-covered fields, the railway stretched into darkness, silent now, waiting patiently for morning. The tracks gleamed faintly beneath the moonlight, hidden behind clouds. The station stood empty, its lanterns still glowing softly, the platform still damp from rain. Everything waiting, everything resting. Imagine now that you are seated beside that same fire. The blanket feels warm, the chair feels comfortable, the room feels safe. Outside, the rain continues its gentle lullaby. Inside, the warmth surrounds you completely. You hear the occasional crackle of glowing embers. You hear the steady ticking of the clock. You hear your own slow breathing. Nothing more, nothing less. Only peaceful sounds, only peaceful moments, only peaceful rest. The worries of the day have faded. The tasks have been completed. The journey has ended, and now there is only stillness. A beautiful stillness, the kind that arrives after a long day, the kind that invites sleep, the kind that wraps around you like a soft blanket. The firelight grows dimmer, the room grows quieter, the rain becomes softer still, and as midnight drifts gently into the early hours of morning, the entire countryside settles into deeper rest. The cottages, the fields, the forests, the station, the train, the village, all sleeping beneath the protective blanket of fog, all resting beneath the peaceful Victorian sky. And there, beside the glowing hearth, surrounded by warmth and quiet, the night continues its gentle journey toward dawn, very slowly, very softly, very peacefully. The night passed gently, hour by hour, rainfall by rainfall, dream by dream. Beyond the cottage windows, the countryside rested peacefully beneath a blanket of silver mist. The village slept, the railway slept. Even the ancient oak trees seemed content to remain perfectly still beneath the quiet Victorian sky. Inside the cottage, the fire had faded into glowing embers. The grandfather clock continued its faithful work. Dick-chick, dick-chick, marking the slow passage of time while the world rested. Outside, the darkness gradually began to change. Not suddenly, not all at once, But little by little, the deepest shades of night softened. The horizon became slightly lighter. The fog shifted gently across fields and meadows. And somewhere beyond the hills, morning quietly prepared its arrival. The first birds awakened before sunrise. A robin perched upon a garden fence. Its feathers puffed against the cool air. For a few moments it sat silently, watching, listening, waiting. Then it offered a single cheerful note, a simple sound, a small greeting to the coming day. Soon another bird answered. Then another. The countryside slowly began awakening. Not loudly, not hurriedly, but gently, as though nature itself understood the value of a peaceful morning. Arthur awoke shortly after dawn. For a few moments he remained comfortably beneath his blankets listening. The rain had stopped. The wind had vanished. Only silence remained. The kind of silence that often follows a long night of rain. The kind that makes the world feel freshly washed and wonderfully calm. Arthur smiled. There was something special about mornings after rain. Everything seemed brighter, cleaner, softer. He dressed slowly, pulled on his wool coat, and made his way downstairs. The cottage still held traces of warmth from the previous evening's fire. The scent of tea leaves lingered in the kitchen. Morning light filtered gently through lace curtains. Outside, the fog remained, though now it glowed softly beneath the rising sun. A kettle soon began singing upon the stove. Arthur prepared his morning tea. The familiar routine felt comforting. The simple movements, the familiar sounds, the quiet beginning of a new day. Cup in hand, he stepped outside. The garden sparkled. Tiny droplets clung to every leaf and flower. Spiderwebs stretched between rose bushes like delicate silver lace. The air smelled fresh, wonderfully fresh. Earth, rain, grass, morning. All blended together into a fragrance that seemed impossible to describe, yet instantly recognizable. Arthur took a slow breath, then another. The world felt peaceful, perfectly peaceful. As he walked toward the station, the village gradually came to life. A baker opened his shop. Warm aromas drifted onto the street. Fresh bread, sweet pastries, warm cinnamon. A milk cart rolled quietly along the cobblestones. Shopkeepers swept doorways. Curtains opened, wondered, and welcomed sunlight. Yet despite these signs of activity, everything remained wonderfully calm. No one rushed, no one hurried. The village seemed to move at its own comfortable pace, just as it always had. Soon the familiar shape of Rosewood Crossing Station appeared through the fog. Arthur smiled. The station looked beautiful in the morning light. Lanterns still hung from iron posts, their flames extinguished now. Flower boxes glistened with raindrops. The station clock stood proudly above the entrance, its brass frame catching the first golden rays of sunlight. Tick-a-tick-a-tick. Tick, the clock continued faithfully, just as it had yesterday, just as it would tomorrow. Some things changed. Seasons, weather, years. But some things remained wonderfully dependable. The station clock was one of them. Olive, the station cat, was already awake. Arthur spotted her sitting upon a wooden bench. She appeared completely relaxed, one paw tucked beneath her chest, eyes half closed, enjoying the cool morning air. When she noticed Arthur approaching, she stretched lazily, then walked toward him with slow confidence. Arthur laughed softly. "Good morning, Olive." The cat responded with a quiet purr, a greeting of her own. Together they stood for a moment watching the fog drift across the tracks. The rails stretched into the distance, silver lines disappearing into mist, waiting for the day's first train, waiting for new journeys, new stories, new travelers. Arthur walked slowly along the platform, inspecting lanterns, checking benches, enjoying the peaceful start to the day. Everything appeared exactly as it should. The station felt calm, content, almost sleepy despite the approaching morning. Above, clouds began breaking apart. Patches of blue sky appeared. Sunlight spilled across fields. The fog slowly started lifting, like a curtain rising at the beginning of a play, gradually revealing the countryside once more. The distant hills returned. Farmhouses emerged from the mist. Trees regained their shape. The world awakened. Slowly, beautifully, peacefully. Arthur paused at the far end of the platform. From here he could see the countryside stretching toward the horizon. Golden morning light touched the fields. Birds crossed the sky. Smoke rose gently from cottage chimneys. Everything felt exactly right. Not perfect, not extraordinary. Simply right, and perhaps that was enough. Perhaps true happiness often lived in moments like these. A quiet station, a fresh morning, a warm cup of tea, the promise of another peaceful day. The first distant whistle echoed across the countryside. A morning train, far away yet steadily approaching. Arthur listened carefully. The sound carried across hills and meadows. A familiar sound, a comforting sound, the railway awakening for another day. He smiled, then adjusted his coat. The day was beginning. And somewhere beyond the fog-covered horizon, new stories were already making their way toward Rosewood Crossing. New journeys, new passengers, new memories waiting to be discovered. But those stories could wait. For now, the morning remained gentle, the countryside remained peaceful, and the station stood quietly beneath the soft Victorian sun, ready for whatever the day might bring. The morning unfolded slowly over Rosewood Crossing. Sunlight filtered through the last ribbons of fog. The station clock continued its steady rhythm. Dot, ducked, dot, duck, ducked. And the rails gleamed softly beneath the golden light of dawn. Arthur stood near the platform's edge, holding a warm cup of tea. The steam curled lazily upward into the cool morning air. Everything felt peaceful, the kind of peaceful that arrives only after a long night of rain, the kind of peaceful that makes the world seem softer, gentler, kinder. Far across the countryside came the distant whistle of the morning train, long, low, comforting. The sound drifted across fields and hills like a familiar greeting. Arthur smiled. The day was officially beginning. Soon the train appeared. Its dark locomotive emerged from the fading mist. Steam rolled gently from its chimney. Golden sunlight reflected from polished brass fittings. The carriages followed behind, like a procession of warm wooden rooms, traveling through the countryside. The train slowed gracefully as it approached the station. Its wheels sang softly against the rails. Nick-clack, 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 then slower and slower, until finally it came to rest beside the platform. Steam drifted around the engine. Passengers prepared to begin their day. Some carried briefcases, others held baskets. One gentleman carefully balanced a stack of books. A young woman carried a bouquet of fresh flowers. The morning felt calm and ordinary, and yet, something about this train seemed different. As passengers stepped onto the platform, Arthur noticed a young traveler sitting quietly inside the final carriage. Unlike the others, he did not seem hurried. He remained seated beside the window, watching the countryside, watching the station, watching the morning unfold. Eventually he rose and stepped onto the platform. He carried only a small leather suitcase, nothing more. His coat appeared well cared for but slightly worn. His shoes carried traces of many journeys, and yet his expression remained peaceful. Almost thoughtful, Arthur greeted him with a polite nod. "Good morning." The traveler smiled warmly. "Good morning." His voice was gentle, the sort of voice that seemed perfectly suited to quiet mornings. For a moment, neither man spoke. The station around them remained wonderfully calm. Birds sang from nearby hedges. A soft breeze moved through the flower boxes. Somewhere in the village, a baker opened his door. The scent of fresh bread drifted through the air. The traveler took a deep breath. "It smells wonderful here." Arthur smiled. "It usually does after rain," the traveler nodded. "I think I've been looking for a place like this." Arthur glanced toward the village. It was not a grand place, not famous, not important, just a small Victorian village surrounded by fields and rolling hills. Yet perhaps that was exactly its charm. The traveler introduced himself as Henry Whitmore. He explained that he had spent years moving from city to city, years surrounded by noise-busy streets, crowded stations, endless schedules, and lately he had begun longing for something quieter, something slower, something simpler. Arthur understood immediately. Many people believed happiness lived in distant places, yet often it waited in simple moments: morning sunlight through fog, tea beside a fireplace, rain upon a cottage roof, the sound of a train arriving exactly on time. The little things, the gentle things, the things that often went unnoticed. Henry looked toward the station clock. Its brass frame glowed in the morning light. "Beautiful clock," he said. Arthur chuckled softly. "She's older than both of us." Together they listened. Dot-chick, dot-chick-chick. The sound seemed strangely comforting. Steady, reliable, bespoke, as though reminding everyone nearby that there was no need to hurry. Time would continue moving, as it always had, as it always would. Meanwhile, Olive the station cat had taken a special interest in the newcomer. She approached carefully, tail raised, whiskers forward. Henry crouched beside her. The cat immediately began purring. Arthur laughed. "Well, that's unusual." "Why?" "Olive doesn't trust everyone." Henry smiled. "Maybe she simply appreciates quiet company." Olive seemed to agree. She settled comfortably beside him, closing her eyes as sunlight warmed her striped fur. The scene felt perfectly peaceful. A traveler, a cat, a quiet station. A beautiful morning. Nothing dramatic, nothing urgent. Only a simple moment. And somehow those simple moments often became the most memorable. As the morning continued, the train eventually prepared to depart. Steam drifted upward. The conductor checked his watch. Passengers settled into seats. Doors closed gently. The whistle sounded once. Then the locomotive began moving, slowly, smoothly, comfortably. Click-clack, click-clack, click-clack. The familiar rhythm echoed through the countryside. Henry watched until the final carriage disappeared beyond the hills. Then silence returned. Only birdsong remained, and the distant rustling of leaves. Arthur offered to show Henry the village. Together they walked along the quiet lane, leading away from the station. Sunlight sparkled on dew-covered grass. Cottage gardens overflowed with roses and lavender. Stone walls bordered winding pathways. Everything seemed touched by morning light. Everything seemed calm. The village moved at its own gentle pace. No one rushed, no one hurried. The day unfolded naturally, like pages turning slowly in a favorite book. As they walked, Henry noticed something. For the first time in many years, he felt relaxed. Not because anything extraordinary had happened, but because nothing extraordinary needed to happen. The countryside asked nothing of him. The village expected nothing from him. The morning simply existed, quickly, peacefully, beautifully. And perhaps that was enough. Perhaps peace was not something to chase. Perhaps peace was something to notice. Something already waiting in the simple moments of life. The sun climbed higher. The fog disappeared completely. The station became a distant shape behind them. And somewhere beyond the hills, Trains continued their journeys across the Victorian countryside, carrying passengers, carrying stories, carrying dreams, while Rosewood Crossing remained exactly as it had always been, a place of lanterns, a place of quiet mornings, a place where time seemed to move a little more slowly, and where every journey, no matter how long, eventually led home. The morning sunshine continued to spread across Rosewood Crossing. Golden light touched rooftops. It warmed stone walls. It sparkled upon cottage windows, still decorated with tiny droplets of rain. Henry walked beside Arthur through the peaceful village. Their footsteps echoed softly along the cobblestone lane. Around them, the village carried on with its gentle routines. A gardener watered roses. A baker arranged fresh loaves behind his window. A milkman tipped his hat as he passed. Everything felt calm, unhurried, as though the entire village had agreed long ago that life was best enjoyed slowly. They soon reached a narrow street, lined with small Victorian shops. Flower boxes overflowed with lavender. Climbing ivy framed old brick walls. Gas lamps stood between storefronts, though now extinguished beneath the bright morning sky. A wooden sign swayed gently above one doorway. Its painted letters had faded slightly with age, yet they remained beautiful. Lavender Lane Bookshop. Henry paused. Something about the shop immediately caught his attention, not because it was large, not because it was famous, but because it felt welcoming. The kind of place that invited visitors to stay a while. The kind of place where stories seemed to live quietly among the shelves. Arthur noticed Henry smiling. "Go on," he said softly. "Take a look inside." A small bell chimed as the door opened. The sound was delicate, pleasant, almost musical. Warm air greeted them immediately. The shop smelled of old paper, polished wood, tea leaves, and something else. Something comforting that was difficult to describe. Perhaps it was simply the scent of thousands of stories waiting patiently to be discovered. Sunlight filtered through tall front windows. Dust motes drifted lazily through golden beams. Rows of books stretched from floor to ceiling. Some were new, others were decades old. A few appeared ancient. Their leather bindings carried the marks of countless readers. The entire shop seemed wrapped in quiet, a peaceful sort of quiet, the sort that encouraged slow browsing and gentle thoughts. Behind a wooden counter sat the owner, an elderly woman named Mrs. Everleigh. Her silver hair was neatly arranged beneath a lace cap. Round spectacles rested upon her nose, and beside her sat a teacup that seemed permanently attached to the counter. Mrs. Everleigh looked up from her book. A warm smile appeared immediately. "Good morning, Arthur." "Good morning, Mrs. Everleigh. And who is your friend?" Arthur introduced Henry. Mrs. Everleigh welcomed him as though he had been visiting the shop for years. There was something reassuring about her presence. Something calm, like a favorite aunt or an old friend. Henry wandered among the shelves. Books surrounded him on every side. Travel journals, poetry collections, railway histories, nature essays, Victorian novels. Every shelf seemed to offer another quiet adventure. He ran his fingers gently along leather spines. Some books had traveled through generations. Others carried handwritten notes from previous owners. Tiny messages hidden between pages, small fragments of forgotten lives. The shop felt less like a business and more like a collection of memories, a place where stories patiently waited to be discovered again. Near the back of the shop stood a comfortable armchair. Beside it rested a small table. A kettle steamed gently nearby. The setup looked so inviting that Henry couldn't help smiling. "People sit there for hours," Mrs. Everleigh explained. "Sometimes they read, sometimes they nap, and sometimes they simply listen to the rain." Henry laughed softly. It sounds perfect. Mrs. Everleigh nodded. Many of life's best moments are simple. Arthur smiled at those words. He had always believed the same thing. As the morning passed, sunlight moved slowly across the wooden floorboards. The bookshop remained wonderfully peaceful. Occasionally a customer entered. The bell chimed. A quiet greeting followed. Then silence returned. Nobody rushed. Nobody hurried. Even time itself seemed to move more slowly inside Lavender Lane bookshop. The grandfather clock near the stairs ticked softly. Dot tick, dot tick, dot tick. A familiar rhythm, much like the station clock, much like the train wheels, steady, comforting, gentle. Eventually, Henry discovered a small shelf tucked beneath a staircase. Unlike the other shelves, this one contained journals, personal journals, handwritten diaries from years long past. Their pages held observations of daily life, descriptions of gardens, weather notes, travel memories, still reflections. Henry opened one carefully. The writing inside was elegant and neat. A single passage caught his eye. The happiest days are rarely the loudest. They are the quiet mornings, the peaceful evenings, the simple moments we almost forget to notice. Henry read the words twice, then a third time. They felt strangely important, not because they revealed some great secret, but because they spoke a simple truth, one that many people overlooked. Outside, a light breeze stirred the lavender flowers along the lane. Inside, tea continued steaming gently. The clock continued ticking. Books continued waiting patiently upon their shelves. The entire shop seemed suspended between moments, neither fully part of the past nor entirely part of the present, simply existing, quickly, comfortably, peacefully. As midday approached, Mrs. Everleigh brought fresh tea for everyone. The cups warmed their hands. The aroma filled the room. Outside, the village remained calm beneath the sunshine. Inside, conversation drifted gently from topic to topic. Books, gardens, trains, weather. The sort of conversation that required no effort. The sort that felt easy, natural, comfortable. For Henry, something remarkable was happening. The hurried pace he had carried for years was beginning to fade. The constant need to rush, the constant need to plan, the constant feeling of chasing the next destination. All of it seemed farther away now, like distant clouds disappearing beyond the horizon. In its place came something else, something softer, something quieter, a sense of peace, a sense of belonging, a sense that perhaps he had arrived exactly where he was meant to be. And so the hours passed gently inside the little bookshop on Lavender Lane, among stories, among teacups, among sunlight and old wooden shelves, while outside, the village continued enjoying another beautiful Victorian day. And somewhere beyond the hills, trains continued travelling through the countryside, their wheels singing softly upon the rails, carrying travellers toward destinations known and unknown. While here, in the heart of Rosewood Crossing, time moved a little more slowly, and life felt wonderfully simple.